3, 2, 1. Welcome to the David the Dog Trainer Podcast, episode 168.
Hello. I was still getting situated, sir.
That's a bright-ass water bottle you got there.
I can't lose it.
I like it.
Yellow is a fellow.
All right, so today we have two topics we're going to get into. You know the episodes that I'm prepared for because I get right into the topic. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know how long we're going to spend on each of these, but we will break this up into two different topics and give our opinions on them. Yeah. These are sparked by just comments we've received lately, questions we may have been asked, things I've just overheard in lessons, stuff like that, that I kind of want to get into.
Cool.
Let's see. Which one should we start with, Josh?
I don't know. And I will say, he sent me this on Friday, which we're doing this a little bit later.
Was it Friday or was it yesterday?
Maybe it was yesterday.
I think it was yesterday.
Okay. Man, I was trying to give you more credit. Let's see. Boy, what is this scribble? How do you read this? I
got that doctor's handwriting.
Okay. He only does it while the Ecollar.
Hold on. How about I read them?
Yeah,
okay?
read it off there. No, you read it off of there. You tell me what you said.
He only does it with the e-collar on or with treats. Okay. Or my old dog is teaching my new dog things.
Is that what you... Yeah. Okay. Give me the first topic.
You want the first one?
Yeah, let's do the first. Let's do it from the top.
So I overheard in a lesson yesterday that one of our trainers was doing. The client say, yeah, he's doing really well, but he only listens when he has the e-collar on, right? But there's a common thing, I think, that virtually every dog trainer that uses training tools hears all the time, right? It's probably a common thing that virtually all dog owners have said at one point in time, right? And it got me thinking a couple of things. One, the reason for it, which obviously we know, which we're going to talk about a little bit here. And two, it got me thinking about another similar phrase that I hear prior to training on the phone with people, which is my dog only listens when I have treats out, right? And a lot of times clients will tell us that over the phone. They will say, we'll be talking to them, we'll be like, yeah, we've done positive only training in the past, know, but it's only gotten us so far. And, my dog only ever listens when I have the treats out, which I don't like, right?
Yeah.
And this gets into something we talked about a couple of episodes ago. We were reacting to that story of Woo thing about our job as trainers is to not let owners lie to themselves too much, right? Because it can shoot you in the foot very, very quickly. And I'll give you the example. Let's say I have a client that reaches out to me that's done force-free training before, right? And they say, yeah, I don't like this style of training because I'm just bribing my dog. My dog only ever listens when I have treats, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of balanced dog trainers may hear that and they would say, oh yeah, that's because force-free training doesn't work and blah, 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 and this and that, right?
Yeah.
So I want to start with that end of the spectrum of if I do that, I put myself in a very vulnerable position when they start the balance training and they say the same thing with the training tools.
Yep.
My dog only listens when I have the training tools on. And because I made it seem like the force-free training was the problem and the reason why the dog only ever listened when they had the treats out. If you do balance training, it won't be that way. Your dog will listen just because they respect you and like all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Immediately, I turn into a contradicting hypocrite.
Yeah.
Right? So I always, when people tell me that, when they say my dog only ever listens when I have treats out, I say, generally speaking, that is because something you were doing in the process was wrong. Because here's the thing. Let's say you have a very food motivated dog, right? Force-free training will be able to get you pretty far as your teaching stages of things, right? And if your dog is actively motivated for the thing that you have, well, the easy solution is make sure that you have treats more often, right? Why are you trying to practice your training so often without some sort of reinforcement at play, right? And it's the same thing with the e-collar, right? And steer me if I'm getting too off topic with this, if I can clarify anything, obviously. I always tell everybody, no matter what style of training you're doing, right? Whether you're using exclusively positive reinforcement, whether you're using exclusively negative reinforcement and positive punishment, whether you're trying to do a force-free approach or a balanced approach or whatever it may be, once you have the clarity established, meaning the dog understands what the expectations are, behavior will always be contingent on consistent reinforcement.
Yeah.
Right? So what I mean by that is the only reason why a dog would ever do anything that you want them to do is because there is either some sort of consistent reward for them doing it or some sort of consistent punishment for them not doing it.
Yeah.
Right? And when people tell me that the dog only ever listens when they have treats out, that means they are way too inconsistently asking the dog to do things when there's nothing in it for the dog.
Yeah.
And when people tell me on the contrary that they only do it when they ever have the e-collar on, that tells me that they are very, very inconsistently asking the dog to perform behaviors when they are not in a position to punish for non-compliance of it. So I tell them, how do we solve this problem? How do we get to, because I understand, from the outside looking in, when you look at this, it's like, Jesus Christ, it's like I got to carry treats in my pocket 24/7, or else my dog will never listen to me. Or Jesus Christ, like if for one day I forget to put the e-collar on, my dog's never going to listen to me, right? Because that's not what I'm saying either. With any training program you're doing, whether it's a force-free approach or let's even just say a predominantly positive reinforcement approach, right? Where you're really trying to lean into, you have a very motivated dog and you're using some consequences, obviously. But for the most part, the dog has the food drive to lean into that pretty heavily. Or if we're using an approach that relies pretty exclusively on the e-collar or the leash or whatever it may be, the way we get to a point where the dog listens without the treats or listens without the e-collar on is by getting to a place where it's skewed, where almost 100% of the time when we ask them to do something, we're in a position to either reward it or punish for non-compliance of it, right? And if you just do that, if you tell yourself, am I about to ask my dog to do something? If you're about to ask your dog to do something, if yes, am I in a position to reward if they do it correctly? If no, am I in a position to punish for non-compliance if they don't do it correctly? If no, do not ask the dog to do anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Heard. Yeah.
And if you could do that 99% of the time, right? 99% of the time, you're in a position to either reward or punish for non-compliance of the thing that you're asking them to do. On the off shots, when the collar isn't on, the dog will just listen to you because the history of reinforcement is so strong that they're expecting that they're going to get something, so they're just going to do it. Right? Yeah. This is where you get into variable reward cycles and stuff like that, right? Where basically what you're doing is it's like the slot machine example, right? Where you play the slot machine not because you're reinforced on every single spin, right? You play the slot machine because at some point you're going to hit it big with it, right? That's kind of the reward side of things. And if you're doing a force-free approach, you have to be very cognizant of that. Is the dog almost always going to be guessing that they're going to be getting a reward for it? And if so, the dog will just listen whether you have the treats or not, right? And then on the contrary, with the punishment, right, it has to be a contingency. It has to be consistent that every time you ask them to do it, if they don't do it, the history of reinforcement or the history of punishment is so ingrained, it's so consistent that they are just going to listen whether that collar is on or not.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so would you say, basically you would say that they're kind of jumping the gun when they're trying to do this without any punishment or reinforcement.
Yeah.
It's like you maybe trusted your dog too soon to do that. And I guess after the first time he doesn't do it, you should know, hey, we need to work on this a little bit more. Yeah,
and it creates this false picture that the dog should just listen right? Because I said so, right? You know what I mean? And it's like I think, you could look at that phrase two ways. Like the dog should just listen because I said so, because I'm going to correct them if they don't do it, right? But that's not just because. The dog is listening to avoid the consequence. Yeah. Right?
You're still going to give a punishment.
Because they understand there is a contingency at play. If I do this, I avoid this consequence or I gain this reward. If I don't do this, I'm still going to be made to do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's not just cause. You know what I mean? So that's where a lot of people say that, right? Like my dog should just listen to me because I asked them to do it. And I'm like, I agree with you, but, right? That means that you're going to have to provide your end of the spectrum of give them a reason why they should just listen to you, right?
Yeah.
And same deal, if you're looking at a force-free approach, it's like, well, the dog should listen whether I have the treats or not. Again, totally agree, but you get to that point by making sure you are virtually 100% of the time being consistent with the use of them.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, I think we just, we jump the gun and we get in way too much of a rush to fade out the training tools as opposed to just look at like what works, right? Like if you have a way where the dog listens to you, like let's say my dog, and I'm going to use the treat example a lot because that's the one that frustrates me the most because, everybody likes to talk about how like, you're just correct dogs or this or that. It's like, no, if we have dogs that are food motivated and we can get the dog to like doing the training, like we absolutely want to lean into that as much as we can. Mm-hmm. But like people make it seem like it's so fucking hard to just give the dog a treat to like when they do the thing that you want them to do.
Yeah. Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like take, and I'm not saying ask your dog to do stuff all the time, but it's like if somebody comes to say, God, my walks are fucking horrendous when I don't have treats. But when I have treats, they're fucking perfect. It's like, how hard is it just to get a little treat pouch and take some treats with you if you're telling me that the dog is so good with the treats, right? Or when you say, oh, yeah, when I do my training, if I don't have the treats, the dog doesn't fucking listen to anything. Yeah. If I do have the treats, it's like the dog is so good with it, right? It's like, okay, well, just use the treat. You know what I mean? Like use the food, reward the dog, right? Give them some clear incentive to want to do these behaviors, right? And, again, I'm not suggesting bribe your dog all the time, right? There are ways to do it where it's like you don't have to like trick the dog and be like, hey, look, here's treats. Yeah. Listen to me. You know what I mean? But sometimes it really is as simple as whether you're bribing the dog or not. If the dog listens when you have a treat pouch on you, it's like just have the treat pouch on you until that behavior is so habitual for them to listen that if you don't have it on you every now and then, it's not the end of the world, right? Same deal with the e-collar. It's like, when people say like, oh, yeah, the dog is so good when the e-collar is on. But like, I hear this one all the time. Like they'll say, God, it's like, I haven't used the e-collar in a long time and I put the e-collar on my dog recently. And, I can just tell just having the collar on, they're more behaved. It's like, if you're telling me it's as simple as when you wake up in the morning, if you just clip the collar on them, you don't even have to do anything different. They're better. It's like, why are you not just doing that every day?
Yeah.
Like, let's make this a little easier for ourselves. Yeah. Like let's not overcomplicate this.
Literally.
And it's like, I look at what is the bigger problem here. The bigger problem here is these pictures we create in our head of like what it should look like. Right. And I think a lot of people just put this picture in their head of, again, we should just, and I think it's partly fault of all these dog trainers on the internet that preach about like, oh, your relationship should be strong enough that like the dog just fucking listens to you because your bond is so good and stuff. And it's like, not really. You know what I mean? Like even that example, like your relationship if your relationship is what is keeping the training good, that means you've done a really good job of just being consistent with giving the dog a reason to listen to you consistently. You're a predictable figure of authority, right? You're going to predictably be reinforcing the things you like and punishing the things that you don't like. So yes, it's not about the tools. It's about what you represent as a whole. But it all starts from the top down with being consistent about providing consistent reinforcement for the things you want the dog to do or don't want the dog to do.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. So, again, like I look at these, I'm like, how long can I spend on these topics? It's like, I don't know how much more there's to say about it, but it's like behavior is contingent on consistent reinforcement. So make sure if you're going to ask the dog to do something that you are in a position to reinforce it one way or another, whether they do it or whether they don't do it, however it is that you want. Right? And stop asking your dog to do shit if you're not in a position to enforce it. If you could just do that one thing and just say, like, if the e-collar isn't on, I don't ask my dog to do anything, right? Or if I don't have some sort of reinforcement handy, if the e-collar isn't on, I'm not going to ask the dog to do anything. If you did that for a week, I swear to God, the amount of difference you're going to see in how your dog ultimately listens to you is going to be like absolute night and day. Absolute night and day. And here's the other side of it, right? all those times you're asking your dog to do things when you're not in a position to enforce it, you probably don't even need the commands in that moment. Yeah. I'll give you an example of one that I see all the time, right? When people are trying to get their tools on and they're trying to tell the dog to like sit or down, right? It's like morning, you want to get the pinch collar on, you want to get the e-collar on, they're like sit, 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 sit. You're not in a position to enforce it. You're training the dog to blow you off in that moment, and you don't even need the command. Yeah. When I collar up dogs, I don't say anything. I just walk up to them and put the fucking collar on. Yeah. Why do I need them to sit to put the collar on? Right? Some people will say, well, they run away from me then if I don't put them into a sit. It's like, well, they're not even sitting for you, right? Yeah. So how about this? Go just put a leash on them so they can't run away from you. You don't have to say anything to put a leash on them. Yep. You don't have to say, come to put the leash on. You can just go put the leash on them, right? Which is another place where people will use a command where they don't need to use the command, right? Yep. And then the dog can't get away from you. You just put the collar on, you're good to go, right?
Yeah. It's funny how when you break it down like that, it's like you miss what the actual start of the problem is, you know? And you're blaming it on this one thing when it's like you can't even get your dog to like stay still for you.
Yeah.
You know?
And then you can look at like making things easier for yourself. It's like a lot of people will try to, they'll have issues when they're in the kitchen of the dog being like counter surfy or trying to steal food off the counter and stuff like that. And they'll be like, oh, well, I'm just going to do a bed stay every time I'm in the kitchen. It's like, well, that takes a lot of reinforcement in order to continually have them in a bed stay day after day after day, which is a much more precise expectation to hold them to, right? Yeah. Where, you know, if you look at it from that lens, it's like, do you need a command in that moment, or do you need to just be really consistent for a week about punishing your dog for the behavior you want them to actually stop? Then it's just gone, and you don't have to do that bed stay for 3 years with the dog every single day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there are so many ways to look at every individual problem that you may be having and ask yourself, do I actually need a command in this moment, right? If you do need to stop the dog from doing something, right? There's not like an easy management technique that doesn't involve some sort of command. It's like, you know, is this something I could just punish for and inhibit so it goes away so then I don't have to worry about it anymore, right? And then you're good. It's like, let's use the example of counter surfing in the kitchen, right? Yeah, every single day for probably a week or two, you're going to have to make sure the e-collar's on every time they're in the kitchen so you can consistently correct for it. Yep. But then once you hit the point where you go a week where the collar is on every time they're in the kitchen and they don't jump one time, then you don't need it anymore. Then you can fade it out.
Yeah.
And because it's gone, because you fixed the problem, right? You're not managing it. You're not contingent on hitting the button every single time they get on the counter anymore because they're just not getting on the counter anymore, right?
Yep.
Which is another point to add on to this, which is how do we get the dog to listen without the e-collar on? By getting the dog to listen perfectly with the e-collar on without ever needing to use it.
Yeah.
Because you've been so consistent with it.
Yeah. This probably goes without saying, but do you feel like a lot of this is I don't know how to say this, fair weather owners, you know, where they get the training, it's like, you know, they use the tool for a couple months and then they get lax with it and don't use it maybe, and then they come back.
I think fair weather is probably the wrong word for it. I think there's a lot of people that are like all or nothing with their training. Okay. Right. So that's a good kind of side topic to this, which is there are some people that they'll sign up for training and they're not lazy. They're committed. They're like, we're fucking doing everything. Yeah. We're doing an hour and a half of training every day. I'm doing treat training. I'm doing e-collar stuff. I have the e-collar on all the time, right? Like they're constantly engaging the dog. They're going for walks every day, stuff like that. But then that amount of work is completely unrealistic to maintain long term. Then they go from that extreme to nothing, right? We don't even put the e-collar on. I don't ask the dog to do anything. When I do ask the dog to do anything, it's in the worst times possible because the dog is probably already misbehaving and then I'm trying to use commands to get them to stop misbehaving, but I don't have an e-collar. You know what I mean? It's like all or nothing, and they create such a massive contrast to the dog of like when we're in training mode, we're really fucking on, but when we're in real life, there's no rules, right?
Heard.
Which is why I've created for myself. Because listen, I tell everybody, like, I'm always looking for the easy way out with stuff. Right? I'm not trying to create a ton of work for myself. I always tell everybody, like, when I get home, the last thing I want to do is spend an hour training my dogs. Yeah. Right. So I've created hacks to make things as easy as possible. Yeah. Right. Here are my hacks. Right. E-collar use. There are places that forever and ever for the end of time, you'll always put the e-collar on. I've said this 8 million times on this podcast. Do you know what my 3 places that I put the e-collar on all the time are? Jesus, Josh, you don't pay as much attention as you should.
Yes, I do.
All right, here we go. You ready?
Yeah.
Anytime people come over my house,
Yeah.
forever and ever till the end of time, e-collar goes on my dog. Anytime we go off leash anywhere, forever and ever till the end of time, e-collar goes on.
Yeah.
And anytime we go into public, forever and ever for the end of time, the e-collar goes on.
Yeah.
Right? And I know just by having it on in those situations that I will never, those are the 3 places where if my dogs are going to blow me off somewhere, it's in one of those 3 places. If there's going to be a really problematic thing that happens, it's going to be in one of those 3 places. So just by making sure a part of my routine anytime in one of those 3 places is putting the e-collar on them, I'll never get caught off guard where if they really blow me off, I can't do anything about it.
Yeah. Listen, I totally took that the wrong way. I thought you meant where do you put the e-collar on the dog?
What?
Like actually put the e-collar on the dog.
That's what I'm talking about.
No, but I thought you meant like placement. Like, I don't know why I thought.
Oh, like literally, like the okay.
I was like, here? Like, on the neck? Yeah. I was like, where else you putting it, bro? Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I totally get that.
Okay, yeah. So those 3 places, forever and ever, till the end of time, I'll always put an e-collar on my dog. I just will, right? And I tell my clients all the time, just do that. If you do nothing else, literally, if you don't even use it, if you don't even fucking turn it on, right?
Yeah.
If you don't, if you could just do that, I promise when push comes to shove and your dog is jumping all over your guests, instead of you being like, God, we got to throw the dog in another room, a part of your brain will trigger and say, maybe I just grab the remote and give him a correction right now.
Yeah.
Right? And 99% of your problems will go away, right? So that's one way that I make things extremely easy for myself. Next thing that I do to make things extremely easy for myself, I am so conscious of never giving my dogs commands. Like, honestly, in the house, I almost never ask a formal command out of them.
Yeah.
I mean, you come here all the time. I mean, how often do you see me ask my dogs to do something?
Like maybe once a year.
Like literally, basically never.
Yeah.
Right? Because I want to have to micromanage them as little as possible. I know the more I ask commands, the more work I create for myself. Right?
Yeah.
So basically, I let them do whatever the fuck they want to do as long as it is not an egregious behavior that I want to inhibit that is very clear. Like if they started jumping on you when you came over or something, obviously I would start correcting them for that.
Yeah.
Right? If they started getting into my trash can, I would start correcting them for that.
Yeah.
You know, if they started freaking out at the fence line at the neighbor's dog, I would start correcting them for that. Right? And because of that, I've created so little work where the amount of training I need to do boils down to just if they start really testing the limits and trying to rehearse one of those behavioral issues again. And then I have like 3 days of maintenance of just getting on it consistently, being past it, and then not needing to provide consistent reinforcement anymore because they can do whatever they want again. Yeah. Right? And then 3, when I do need to ask a command, I make sure that I'm in a position to enforce it. Yeah. Right? And generally, when I ask a command, it's going to be in one of the 3 situations I described, which is people coming over the house, going off leash somewhere, or going into public. And because one of my rules is the collar is always on in those situations, I will never give a command and not be in a position to enforce it.
True. Yeah.
Right? And literally, like, it's as simple as that. Yeah. Those 3 rules that I've created for myself, the little amount of work that I need to do to maintain my dog's training is so fucking easy. It's ridiculous. Yeah. It's so easy.
Yeah. I was going to say, do you remember the last time you had to take a couple of days to nix something?
Has it been? I'm trying to think if I could remember one of the last things I really needed to get on. I remember with Waffles, I've shared the story a million times of when he was eating the dirt out of my houseplant.
Yeah.
Right? Like he developed this bad habit of every time I would go like to the bathroom or something like that, if I left him in my living room, we got this giant houseplant in the corner. And he would just go, like, I would come back in the room and there'd be dirt all over the floor because he would just take a bite out of the fucking dirt of the houseplant. Right? And same deal. I got a little lazy with it initially. I probably let it slide for a week or 2. And then I was like, all right, we got to get past this. And we spent, I think, 2 days setting up FaceTime on the plant, going into the other room, having the e-collar on him. We had it set probably all the way up. And the second he stuck his mouth in that plant, he got a big-ass correction for it. And we did that maybe twice. And he's never done it since.
Yeah, and how long ago was that?
That was early. That was probably a year and a half ago, something like that.
There you go.
So that's probably the last big thing. I mean, listen, there's been, I'm sure little things here and there. You know what I mean? Like brush up on some downstays. Like when we had family in town for the holidays last year, it's like there were people in our house significantly more. And because of that, I needed to ask them to do downstays quite a bit more because my, elderly grandmother was in town. We had another dog staying with us, stuff like that. And just because there was so much stimulation in the house, they were a little sloppier with it than they usually are. So same deal, brush up on it a little bit, no big deal.
Yeah.
But little details like that, that's all we really run into at this point. We recognize, okay, this is a problem right now. We come up with a quick and easy solution for it. We get past it and we're good to go.
Mm-hmm. And that's the proof in the pudding,
Yes.
Like you said, just an example with him getting into that. You took the 3 days or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's been a year and a half.
Yeah.
He still has the same free reign when he's out in the living room. Hasn't touched
I'll give you one more. We have obviously our yard is almost like an acre and it's fully fenced in. And my rule of where I put the Ecollar on is I said off leash anywhere. Let me clarify, off leash in uncontained areas.
Yeah.
Right? Like in my backyard, I don't have Ecollars on them all the time. Right?
Yeah.
So Deli, our one pit bull, every 6 or 7 months, will start getting a little bit slow with coming in from the backyard.
Yeah.
Right? A little bit slow with coming in the backyard. And before I finish this story, another hack that I have, back to the commands and stuff, a lot of people are like, well, you need a come command in the house all the time. Use informal commands, right? When I call my dogs, whether it's to go downstairs to their crates, whether it's to come in from the backyard, go into another room, something like that, it's always informal commands where if they blow me off, they're not blowing off a formal command. It's like, let's go, come on, stuff like that I'll say to get them to come with me. And then if they don't listen to that and I desperately need them to come to me, then I'll use my formal command, right? So in the backyard, because they don't generally have Ecollars on, I'm using informal commands to get them in. And Deli, every once in a blue moon, will start getting really slow with coming in, right? And every now and then we're like, all right, you're getting a little bit too slow with this. So same deal. We'll spend a week where we put the Ecollar on anytime she goes in the yard. We start using the formal command, right? Because we're in a position to enforce it then. She doesn't come right away with it. Boom, big correction for that. She comes in, we do that for a week, and then we're past the issue for another fucking 6 or 7 months.
Yeah.
Yep. Trying to think if there's any other examples that I could think of. I think that's about it.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. You know what I mean? That's how we've made things easy for ourselves, is you diagnose and solve problems as they pop up like that in the easiest possible way, and then you just make everything else for yourself simple, so you're not scrambling to start trying to get on the dog when they're already misbehaving.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the biggest takeaway of that is if you simplify everything else and know when you have control, when you don't, and is it even worth, like you said, making actual commands when you know you don't really have control.
Yeah. And back to the treat thing one more time, because we went on the tangent with the e-collar stuff, right? Back to the treat thing of my dog only listens when I have the treats. So when I first started getting into training and was doing more of the competition stuff, I was predominantly doing a force-free approach with the dogs. This is prior to me really using e-collars a lot. I think I used a little Star Mark collar on my walks. But outside of that, there wasn't really training tools and stuff I was using.
Yeah.
My dogs were very food motivated. I spent a lot of time developing their food drive. Yeah. And I taught most of their obedience early on with just treats, right? And I literally just had treats on me all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was the same thing of where I would look at this if I were doing a force-free approach, and I would ask myself the same question, right? Where are the places I need to make sure I always have treats on me, right? People coming over the house, going into public, going off leash somewhere, right? I would have to have some sort of reinforcement in those things, And because of that, those are the only places I would need to ask commands. I'm always in a position to reinforce it when they do the correct thing, and I can keep the engagement on me really well. Right.
Yeah.
But because I literally always had treats on me, I had a treat vest with pockets in it that I would have packed with treats. My dogs listened to me fantastic. Right. Now, listen, I didn't. I think that there's a little bit more downside to the having treats on you all the time. It does take a little bit more precision and engagement. And you have to reinforce a little bit more, and it creates a little bit more work and stuff like that. But if you've got a dog that's very food motivated, you can make a lot of progress with just the treats with that stuff. You know?
Yeah.
But I followed the same rule, right? I had treats on me all the time. So because of that, my dogs didn't really blow me off that much.
Yeah.
And then when I learned how to use training tools, it just took it to the next level.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my little tangent on that whole topic. Is if you're saying my dog only does it with the e-collar on or with the treats on, that is not a dog problem. That is not a training program problem. That is a you just not understanding that you have to have consistent reinforcement long term, right? And that's just the way it is. And don't ask your dog to do stuff if you don't have treats on you or if you don't have the e-collar on. So very simple solution.
Yes. But an easy one that obviously gets looked over quite a bit.
It's looked over quite a bit. Damn, look at that. 30 minutes.
Yeah. That was a long tangent, see?
Okay, so moving on to the next one here. Mm-hmm. My old dog is teaching my dog new things. This was sparked by a YouTube comment we got. I'll take 2 seconds to see if I can find this. If not, no friggin' biggie. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, yeah. So we got this comment from somebody saying, I found out that ever since we had a retired canine, he taught our dog Xena that fireworks and thunder are nothing to be afraid of. Now that Fritz is gone and we have Eva, she is being taught by Xena that she doesn't need to be afraid. And then somebody else commented, I think it makes training easier when you have a dog who is already well behaved and knows the routine. Okay. This is another thing we hear all the time.
Yeah.
You got any thoughts on that? Were you going to say something?
No, I'm interested to hear your take on that.
Okay. So this is 2 parts, right? So the thing that this one individual said, I think it makes training easier when you have a dog who's already well behaved and knows the routine. I agree with that, but not for the reasons that you think. To the thing that this individual said, which is her dog is teaching the other dog that fireworks and thunder are nothing to be afraid of, et cetera, that I disagree with, right? Yeah. Dogs don't really teach things in the way that we think. I think we look at it too human-like. And again, I don't know all the ins and outs of what's going on in this individual's head as far as what they're envisioning when they say that.
Yeah.
But dogs don't consciously be like, oh, yeah, no, don't worry about that thunder over there. It's cool. Hey, it's cool. It's cool. Don't worry. Hey, if you just do this, they're going to give you a treat for it. No. You know, let me show you the ropes, you know, stuff like that. Like dogs don't go around doing that, right?
No.
It doesn't work that way. I think when a lot of people say things like, we'll get calls all the time from people and they'll say, God, my new dog is just learning a lot of bad habits from my old dog, right? Or on the contrary, we'll hear that, when somebody starts training with one of their dogs, they'll start the training, they'll be like, wow, my other dog is really picking up on these things as well, right? It's not because of what you think. What are the common things that dogs may, do poorly with, right? Let's say reacting at the front door, right? Let's say that's one that I feel like a lot of people will say my younger dog is really picking up on. It's learning bad habits from this one.
For sure.
I think really what's happening in that moment is that burst of energy of your dog reacting at the front door. I've said this a lot of times as well. It's like a magnet to dogs. That amount of energy just creates this frenzy where the dog wants to rush over and just be a part of what's going on. It's just too much stimulation. It's just inviting to them, right? Mm-hmm. So they get themselves into the mix because of the distraction that your other dog is providing.
Yep.
Right? And that's why we'll also see in that exact same scenario, we'll start seeing dogs fight. We just signed up a client for training that has 2 dogs that just got into a fight with each other after living together for like a year over the front door. The one dog reacts at the front door all the time, and to the other dog, it was just such a distraction, such a burst of energy that dog ultimately one day decided it was going to go over and try to control that energy and started a fight with the other dog, right? Yeah. The owners were like, oh my gosh, it came out of nowhere. This happened a million times before and it never turned into a fight. And it's like, yeah, it happened a million times before. And slowly that distraction became too much for the dog to practice impulse control around, where they finally decided that they were going to do something about it.
Yeah.
Right? So front door, that's one example where we'll see it, right? Now, on the contrary, let's say these people that made this comment, let's say their last dog used to be really bad with fireworks and thunderstorms and stuff like that, right? And that dog got past it, right? And then they have a new dog, and the new dog is not rehearsing that firework anxiety, right?
Yeah.
I think we as humans would equate that to, well, this dog got past it and understood it wasn't scary, so this dog is just teaching the other dog that there's nothing to be scared of, when in actuality, this dog probably had noise phobia issues. You got past it by doing training with that dog, and then this dog, because this dog isn't rehearsing an extreme aversive reaction to those noises going on outside, this dog is not succumbing to that stimulation.
Yeah. He's just
right?
Whatever.
It's not that it's learning anything from that dog. It's just the additional distraction of what that dog may have been doing in the past is no longer present. So your dog won't be stimulated by that urge to do so. Right? But again, it has nothing to do with a conscious dogs teaching each other to do it thing. It simply has to do with the fact that an out of control dog, in whatever regards you want to say, firework anxiety, doorbell fucking reactivity on the walk, right? Getting into stuff, things like that. It's simply a distraction.
Yeah.
It's simply a distraction, right? Your dog getting into the trash can. He's not like, hey, buddy, come on over here and get some snacks out of this can with me. It's just like a younger dog is going to be curious with what the other dog is doing. If you're not there to supervise it, they're obviously going to go investigate what's going on over there and realize over there are snacks. But it's not that the dog taught them to do it. It's that dog doing it was a distraction and led the other dog to the situation. Which, listen, if you want to say, if you're conscious of that, of how that's working and that it's a distraction and not a conscious thing that the dog is doing, and you want to say that it's the dog teaching the other dog things, whatever. I don't care. You know what I mean? It's not that big of a deal. But it's really important to be aware of it, because some people will take it too far and think that when they train a dog that they have, when they get a younger dog, they don't have to do anything because that older dog is going to train the dog for them.
Yeah.
Right? And that, it just doesn't really work that way. The only thing that I think that dogs can really consciously train each other is boundaries and how they interact with dogs. Like, let's say you have an older dog, right? That's a pretty stable social dog, right? And you have a young, rambunctious asshole puppy. And your older dog is consciously putting that dog in its place when it does things that it shouldn't be doing as far as the interactions. That is a conscious thing that dog is doing, teaching that dog boundaries. But even with that one, there's not this deep emotional insight of the dog doing it, so I could just mold this younger generation to be better with all the other dogs later on.
Yeah.
It is teaching the dog how to interact with them.
Yeah.
And that, as a byproduct, may impact the dog's behavior towards other dogs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's how their language work is, just like movements and boundaries of their social hierarchy, I guess.
Yeah. And in many cases with other things like the doorbell reactivity and situations like that, where you may see that it like looks like one of your dogs is teaching the other dog things, that's really where you can get yourself into trouble, because we talk about all the time with fights, like that fight that our clients ran into before they signed up for training. Generally speaking, a lot of dog fights will happen when one dog tries to discipline the other for things that we should be ultimately disciplining that dog for. You know, like we kind of want to take that responsibility so we don't create too much hierarchical competition within the home amongst them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that can just create, like, if you have dogs constantly at odds with each other, especially a young dog that may be growing and maturing into their own, right? At some point, those dogs are going to get more intense with their challenging of each other if you have the wrong temperaments at play, and that can turn into massive fights later on. So you kind of always want to be the one setting those boundaries.
Yeah. That makes sense. No, I agree on pretty much all this. I knew it wasn't a, hey buddy, let me show you how it's done here, you know? And I definitely always, you know, like the fireworks thing, it's like that dog was just more predispositioned to being afraid of it. Or it's like, let's say, like, even your dogs, for example, like when I come in, the one that's the loudest is Vinny. Yeah. But everyone else is chill. It's just like, that's just how he does things. And it's not like making the rest of your dogs go crazy. He's not like, yo, we all got to go crazy on this. Yeah. You know? It's just how they're just different ways that they go about things. I don't think there's any teaching literally going on there.
Yeah. I just pulled up just a quick search here. So this is from the United States Dog Agility Association. Can dogs be trained by watching other dogs? And I'm sure they're probably going to say very similar to things what I said.
Okay.
So they say, dogs are social creatures, and their affinity for humans and other dogs make the chance that dogs can learn from modeling other dogs very likely. A study published in January in Applied Animal Behavior Science found evidence that supports this theory. So before I say anything, let's figure out what the evidence was. The research study was conducted by a bunch of names that I can't pronounce of the University of Naples in Italy. 50 adult Labrador retrievers were recruited for the study, all of whom were currently being trained to do water rescue. Prior to recruitment, the dogs had not received any type of training other than training related to rescue work. The researchers split the dogs into two groups, beginner and advanced. The beginner dogs could do simple behaviors such as sit down, etc., while the advanced dogs could do the same behaviors in distracting environments with longer durations. The advanced dogs had also learned to perform commands given to them through nets, which was a part of the water rescue training. All of the dogs lived in a regular home as the only dog, and their owners or handlers were not experienced dog trainers. The researchers asked the handlers to teach one group of the dogs to either jump on an object or onto a children's playground slide. These exercises were selected because they were not typical types of behaviors taught to dogs, and therefore the dogs were unlikely to know them. The dogs were randomly grouped to learn either behavior, and each group had a mixture of beginner and advanced dogs. The purpose of this phase of the study was to determine which dogs could learn the behavior in a short amount of time so that they would be removed from the second phase of the test. Dogs that could not learn the behavior quickly were randomly assigned to a group that observed a dog doing the behavior or to a control group at the time. Okay, so before I even go any further, so basically what they're doing, let's take a children's slide, right?
Yeah.
They wanted to teach the dog to jump up onto it.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's a somewhat unique thing, if you will.
Yeah.
And basically what they did was they just took these dogs, the beginner and the experienced ones, and they just went through a process of just them training, getting them onto it, right?
Yeah.
The ones that did well with it, they moved into one group. The ones that didn't do well with it, they moved into another group that would later then model the ones that did well with it.
Yeah.
Right? So my assumption, before we even get any further into this, what's going to happen is they're going to say then, once they did that, they paired a one group, another group dog. They had the dog that was proficient with it do it, and then the other one do it right after, and probably saw an increase that the dogs that went right after did it. Now, this is a little bit weird one if it goes exactly as they're kind of saying in this.
Yeah.
Because let's get into like how do you define the dog training the other dog, right? Or learning from the other dog. Dogs, yes, are social creatures, right? They like to be together, right? Like when I take my dogs off leash in a field, if one of them goes and starts sniffing a spot over there, generally they're all going to go investigate what that dog is doing.
Yep.
So obviously if one of the dogs is jumping up on this slide and going down, the other is just going to follow them up onto it. But it's like, did the dog really learn the command because they were or were they just ironically following them up onto it? And because of that lure of them following the other dog up onto it was more effective than what you had done with them before.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's just kind of weird where like I look at that and I'm like, yeah, like obviously that makes sense that could happen. But at the same time, it feels like a little bit of a stretch to say like they're really learning a lot of stuff from them, right? I think it would be a different story if they took a more complex behavior that they couldn't just like wind up on. Like winding up on a slide, like jumping up onto it is kind of like, I don't know. Like it's like if I have a picnic table in my backyard and one of my dogs gets up onto it, the other's probably gonna be like, oh, let me try to get up onto this thing also. But if I'm training like a retrieve, I have a dog that's a really proficient retriever and I have them do it, I don't think that the dog that is not proficient with it is going to be able to model that very effectively because they're just not looking at it in that way.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So
let's see.
Where was I at here? Quickly. Yeah, okay. The demo dog was an older, experienced water rescue dog who had been trained to perform both the jump onto the trunk and onto the slide behaviors without any type of verbal or physical cue. other than the handler moving to the object. Okay, so that is a physical cue, though.
Yeah.
Moving to the object is a visual cue, right? The reason behind this was so that the observing dog could not pick up on any cues that might become a variable affecting the results later on. So they're trying to create a control where the dog is learning because the other dog is doing it, not because you're giving them a signal for it.
Yeah.
But if the other dog doesn't know the signal to begin with, that wouldn't make a difference. In the demonstration group, the dogs watched the demo dog perform both tasks twice, and then the handlers once again attempted to teach the dogs the behavior they were assigned. In the control group, the dogs did not observe the demo dog, and the handlers taught them the assigned behavior for the same amount of time as the demo group. When the researchers examined the results, they found that there was a statistically significant number of dogs in a demo group that were able to perform the behavior in the time allotted compared to the control group. The age, sex, and training level of the dogs appeared to have no effect on whether or not they could do the behavior, although they found some significance to older dogs in the demo group being more likely to do the behavior, although it was not statistically significant. This has nothing really to do with the dog consciously modeling behavior. And to me, this has everything to do with the dogs being social creatures and just wanting to follow the other dog.
Yeah.
And then they wind up where they want to be. You know what I mean? It's like saying, like, I'm trying to teach my dog to go out into the backyard to go to the bathroom. So like, because my other dogs do it, they taught the dogs to go outside and go to the bathroom. It's like, no, they just followed the dog outside and then wound up being there and using the bathroom. You know what I mean? It's not this conscious thing they're doing. But yes, to my point, that is kind of what I'm saying of it's a distraction, right? Because they're social creatures, they're going to be distracted by what the other dog is doing, not because they're trying to model their behavior, but they want to investigate the other things that they're doing and could accidentally learn bad habits due to that. So if your dog is better behaved, dogs are social creatures, your dog is going to want to stick with your dog. They're not going to put themselves into a position where they would start learning to react out the window or get into the trash can, et cetera, et cetera. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I just think this study's a little
it's
wonky.
Fine. Listen, it's fine. I just don't really know if it's
really
proven much that we don't already kind of know.
Yeah.
Of like dogs like to follow each other.
Yeah.
And he followed him onto a slide.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
100%.
So, yeah, interesting. I guess that's a good way to wrap that topic up.
Yeah.
So I think that they absolutely can learn things from each other if you want to look at it from that lens. It's just absolutely not like a conscious thing. It's just the distraction of wanting to be with or follow the other dog can accidentally get them into trouble in the wrong circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm right there with you on that one. It's all about the following and that like rise in excitement or energy, it's just like that want to like be a part of it.
Yeah. And that's why I said, like, in the two comments, the one referring to the fireworks stuff, I don't really believe that your dog is training your other dog in that case. But having a well-behaved dog when you're working with a younger dog can definitely be easy as you don't have the additional distraction.
Yep.
But it's not because they're training them stuff either.
No, hey, buddy.
All right. Well, that's all I got. My mouth is a fucking desert right now, and I need to get some water, so I'm done talking.
And I don't know what that was, so.
I don't know. It's a ghost.
That was kind of creepy.
Oh, you know what it is? It's the plug for the light fell out of the socket.
Okay. That was random.
All right, guys. We'll catch you around next time.
Yeah, we'll see you.